Morning, everyone. Hope you're having a good weekend, and I know you're looking forward to Thanksgiving coming up this week. So hopefully you can enjoy some time off from school as well as some time with family. Obviously, this year with COVID, it's a little bit different, but hopefully you still get to spend some time with friends and family during the week. So glad I could meet with you again today. So today's lesson is around something that is hopefully meaningful to you, and that's around the difference between hearing and listening. Now, when you hear those terms, hearing and listening, they may sound the same, right? I'm hearing something and I'm listening to something, but they're actually very different. When you're hearing somebody talking, right, you're hearing their sound, right? You can hear the sound of somebody speaking. You can hear it with your ears, and you may and obviously your brain helps you with that as well. But listening is a little bit different. Listening is when you're actually listening, when you're hearing the words, but you're also, I guess you could say, you're processing the words. You're thinking about what's being said, and you can actually repeat it back, right? It's not just if you're hearing something, if you're really not listening to it, you may not be able to remember it, right? So we think about when some situations of where you might hear something instead of listening, right? So if you're listening about a topic that maybe isn't interesting to you, or it's boring, or maybe you're tired, whatever the case is, right? You might be hearing, but you're not listening, okay? But when you're listening, you're listening closely, right? It probably is a topic that interests you. It's something you want to learn more about. Maybe you're learning some instructions about something. So think about that distinction today between hearing and listening. Now, hopefully when you're in school, and hopefully as you're as you're watching this video, that you're listening and not just hearing, especially important in school, right? Sometimes, especially if it's a harder assignment and your teacher is trying to explain something to you, hopefully you're listening where you can repeat it and you truly understand it, right? And it's not just a skill. Listening is a very important skill, not just as a student and somebody growing up, but when you get older, when you get into junior high, you get into high school, and then you get into college and beyond, listening is very important. It's not just it's not something to just kind of gloss over. It's something that's very important for your success in the future. So today we're actually going to hear a story about people who heard God's message but chose to only hear it and chose not to listen. Okay, and again, we talk about those differences between the two. So hopefully you'll be listening as we go through the message today. So we read in the Bible, and you may have heard some of these terms before about when God used prophets to deliver messages to people, right? And these messages were called prophecies. So it were messages that about maybe something that was good to come, or perhaps something bad that would be coming if people didn't change their behavior, change the way they were doing things. So prophets, right? Prophets were those individuals that God passed messages to, and then they shared that message with the people, or another way of saying it is that they prophesized to groups of people about that message that God shared with them. So interestingly enough, we talk about prophets, right? So hopefully you've got a Bible nearby, right? And if you don't, I'll give a second if you want to take a look at it. But your table of contents, right, in the Old Testament, if you actually look at, so there are 39 books in the Old Testament, right? And 17 of them are actually written by, or in the context of prophecies and by prophets. So I'm going to read through them, and some of these names you've probably heard of, and some may sound a little odd. But the 17 books of prophets are Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, Daniel, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. So again, there's a lot of books in the Bible that just talk about messages that God provided to individual people, and then those people went out and shared that message with the people, with certain groups of people, and hopefully, right, because those messages were either good news to come or they were potentially bad news if the people didn't change their behavior. So if it was a message about something bad was going to happen if they did not change their behavior, if they weren't truly listening, if they were just hearing, then odds are they weren't going to change their behavior, and then that bad, whatever that bad activity would be, would come into play. So it's very important that we talk about that distinction between listening and hearing, is that's important, right? And the people of and sometimes they didn't listen. So one of those books is the book of Jeremiah. And one of the books, or one of the stories in that book, specifically out of chapter 31, was around a covenant, right? So if you remember right, a covenant between individuals or groups of people is an agreement, right? And we talk about, you probably heard covenants between God and his people, right? And in the context of the Bible was more of an agreement to worship God and obey God. But there was a story out of Jeremiah around a message for the people of Israel. And that message warned of future difficulties as a consequences of those people's poor choices, right? We talk about if they weren't behaving well, that there were going to be consequences. So Jeremiah asked a gentleman named Baruch to write the words of God's message on a scroll. And then he sent Baruch into the temple to read that scroll to a crowd in hopes that they would hear the message, listen to the message, and tell God that they were sorry and turn away from their evil ways of life. And so Baruch did that, right? He did as Jeremiah asked, and he went to the temple. But the king at the time, king of Israel, who was not a fan, did not believe in God and did not follow God, he found out about this, and he took that scroll and he burned it, right? He did not want the people to hear that message and turn back to God and away from him, right? So the word of the Lord, after that was done, the Lord came back to Jeremiah again with another message. And God said to rewrite those words on another scroll. And God even, he added even more words to the message this time. And, and even though the people broke the last covenant that they had arranged with God, the Lord was being faithful to uphold the promise of a new covenant with the people, right? So this was a new agreement he was looking for, since the old one didn't quite work out the way that he wanted to. And God promised in that, as part of that covenant, God promised to be their God and to forgive their sins. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read one very, very small verse in Jeremiah. It's Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 34, if you're interested later on to take a look. And actually, it's not even actually the entire verse of 34. It's just kind of the second half. But and it may differ depending on the version of the Bible that you have. But it says, let me find it here. So the second half of verse 34, chapter 31 says, "For everyone, both great and small, shall really know me then, says the Lord, and I will forgive and forget their sins." So remember I just mentioned about that was part of the new covenant that God promised to forgive their sins, regardless of what, right? Regardless of what happened in the past, right? So what I want you to do is, we talk about, right, we said those words were written on a scroll, right? So I don't know if you know what a scroll is, but here's a scroll, right? It's a piece of paper that's rolled up, right? And that was just, back then it was kind of rolled up just for convenience sake and try to maintain so, it wouldn't get damaged, right? So part of that verse that I read, and this is a little bit different version of it, but what I want you to do is, as kind of a takeaway from today's lesson, is to write, and again, it might be a different version depending on the Bible you have, and this one was a little different than what I read. It says, "For I will forgive their wickedness and will remember their sins no more." So basically that says the same thing I just said, right? In terms of God forgiving their sins, right? So if you want to write that, again, whatever that version is, you can write it on a sheet of paper. You can make it special if you want to write it on a special colored piece of paper, or shiny piece of paper, whatever the case is. You can either, and when you roll it up, an easy way to do it, right? You can just take a couple paper clips and put them on the end of the scroll, right? Just to kind of keep it intact, right? So then you've got your scroll. Or you could take a piece, if you want to make it a little more special, you could take a piece of string and tie the middle of it together. And that's kind of what they did back then. Didn't have paper clips thousands of years ago, but they did have some string, right? So do that, and the reason why I want you to do that is that you can take a look at that, put that scroll next to your dresser or next to your bed, and every night or every morning, whenever it makes sense to do, right, you can open that scroll and read that short sentence, that no matter what you do, right, obviously we want you to do the right thing and work as God would like you to work. But if you do sin or you do make mistakes, that God will forgive you for it. So, but again, scrolls were very important. And again, as we said, right, those words, which are very critical, but that even though we sin, it's good to know that God will forgive us along the way. But again, even though we know that He'll forgive you, we want to make sure that you're always behaving in the right manner. So a couple things let's talk about for the week, highs and lows and God sighting. So actually, I was shared a message that Aaron Robley passed on around some of his highs and lows for the week, and he notes that one of his highs was he got to play with some friends online. His low was that one of the days he wasn't feeling the best, which certainly happens. And his God sighting was when he was playing games with his family. So, one of the God sightings that I like to share this week, and one that I have to thank my wife for. Right, my wife tries to walk outside early in the mornings and even late at night, and she loves to see sunsets and sunrises, right? Sunrises and sunsets, and how beautiful they can be sometimes. And I admit that I probably don't appreciate that. Certainly don't appreciate that as much as her, but I do appreciate the fact that when she, if she's out for a walk in the morning or something, and she's in a good spot to take a photo of a sunrise, that she'll text me that photo, and it's pretty cool to see. She shares that, and and when you look at a beautiful sunrise or a sunset, God is part of that, right? Even though these days the amount of sunlight or the sunrises and sunsets are coming later in the morning and earlier in the evenings, more than they used to, but that's always great to see. So that's my God sighting for the week. So again, one thing before we close with our prayer, one thing I just want to emphasize again is that difference between hearing and listening, right? So hopefully for this last 15 minutes or so that we've been talking together, that you've been listening, right? And you understand that, it's important that, that at all times to listen, if at all possible, right? There might be times where you're just hearing, right? And not necessarily listening. But again, whether it be in school, in Sunday school, in church, with your family, with friends, whatever the case is, right? And especially as you get older, it's going to be very, very important to be able to listen, right? So the better listener you are, the better feedback that you can give, and hopefully the better you listen, the better you can do something, right? If you're given instructions on something, or just trying to help somebody else out. So if that's one of your key takeaways for today, that'll be great. So let's close with a prayer, and this is actually from these couple of stanzas, or from a song titled "You Are My King" by Billy Foote, and the words are this: is that I'm forgiven because you were forsaken, I'm accepted, you were condemned, and I'm alive and well. Your spirit is within me because you died and rose again. Amazing love, how can it be that you, my King, would die for me? Amazing love, I know it's true. Now it's my joy to honor you. In all I do, I honor you. So with that, we will close out the lesson for this week. Again, have a great week and have a great Thanksgiving. Stay safe with both you and your family, and we'll talk to you soon.